black. It's more or less mono black. He's got to contend with Elspeth in addition, but he's still very familiar with the matchup, so I think he's prepared for it.
Are you ready? Dylan Harris, the black-white mid-range player. He is on your left. He's a number 3 seed and will be on the play. Kent Ketter in the Canada sweatshirt is on your right. Both players leading off on tap lands, which has really been the norm for the whole tournament.
Yeah, a lot of turn 1 land scry. Kent looks like he's got a Xenagos the Reveler, which is obviously a very important planeswalker for him in this matchup. It looks like he just drew a Domri Rod for the turn as well.
Yeah, so we see with Kent a little bit of difficulty in his hand. He did have an Elvish Mystic, but no turn 1 untapped green, so the Domri will come down on curve as opposed to ahead of curve.
And he has a choice here. He can actually cast Sylvan Caryatid, or he can Mizium Mortars to pack right now. I'd imagine he's probably going to lead with Mortars here just because you don't want to let that get out of control.
Yeah, Dylan Harris's turn 2 pack rat is shot down by Mizium Mortars, and that will clear up the board for a turn 3 play here. We see in Dylan's hand some connections to the underworld as well as Obsidat, but first he will make another rat with his mana.
Great draw from Kent there. He's allowed to he's now can cast the second Mizium Mortars to deal with the rat and also develop his mana by casting Elvish Mystic. So good draw there from Kent.
All right. So and he does exactly that. We lead back to Dylan Harris. He does not appear to have a 4th land. I don't believe Kent does either. So there's a little bit of mana wars going on here. As you see, Dylan's going to go ahead and Bile Blight, just a lone Elvish Mystic.
So if we can get a land here, we can get Xenagos online. Let's see. Nope. It is a Courser, though. So let's see if he hits a land on top, and there is not a land, unfortunately.
Courser of Crewfix, one of those cards that Kent said has been a pretty heavy lifter for him throughout the tournament. Not a ramp card, but a card advantage engine, which certainly I would think in a matchup like the one against Black-White Midrange is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, it's definitely something that he wants to stay and play. Unfortunately, Dylan does have a Devour Flesh, which isn't great for Kent. But again, Kent does have that Caryatid in his hand, so even though he knows there's not a land on top of his library, he will be able to play the Caryatid. And Dylan, I don't think, has another Devour Flesh.
Yeah, well, that just kind of does double duty there, doesn't it? So now he knows Kent won't draw land. If Kent had the Courser, he'd get to look down at the next card to try to find an additional land. But because he killed the Courser, he just knows that he'll be keeping Kent on 3 mana.
So Dylan's still stuck on 3 mana. He's going to just have to tap out for Underworld Connections. Can't even activate it this turn.
Yeah, he's going to have to try to get some sort of mana going. And this really will give a window for Kent to start getting ahead on the board. As you said last turn, it was Sylvan Caryatid and Elvish Mystic that were both made there. So he actually has access to 5 mana. And we'll see where he goes with that. And it looks like it's going to be Xenagos, the Reveler.
Yeah, and he's actually going to uptick it and just play. Looks like he might. He's deciding if he wants to play the Caryatid this turn. He could uptick Xenagos' ability and generate 2 mana, or 3 mana and get Domri Rod, actually.
Exactly that. So that's 3 mana. And now, so Ken, with a huge turn, thanks to those mana creatures, is able to make 2 Planeswalkers, Domri pluses and misses. But that's a lot of work, especially because Black-White doesn't have actually a sweeper. It has to 1-for-1 all these things. This is really going to put Dylan behind.
Yeah, and again, one of the important cards for Dylan in this matchup is Desecration Demon. Unfortunately for Kento, he does have that Gorkland Rampager, which can help him power through it. And Dylan is just going to have to draw a card here. He's got a bunch of 5-drops in his hand. It looks like he has Obsidat and Blood Baron in his hand. And he's all out of removal spells because he used all of them early on.
Yeah.
Just Kent's mana creatures, too.
Right. Well, he has 1 ultimate price left, but the threats he's staring down are Planeswalkers, things that don't get ultimate priced very easily. Dylan was able to get a land for that turn, thanks to Underworld Connections. Actually, did see an additional land, so he has a Mutavault. So he should, as of next turn, be able to start making Blood Barons and Obsidats. But the question will really be whether or not that's quick enough.
Yeah, and it looks like he missed yet again with Domri. So getting a little unlucky here with this Domri. I actually don't think I've seen him hit with Domri while he's been on camera for us. But he still has Xenagos in play, so he can activate his Xenagos to get a 2/2 attacker into play. And here's the situation for Kent. He has the Gorkland Rampager, and he's debating, should he cast it and get a threat into play, or does he need it to kind of power through a potential Desecration Demon? I think it's probably better off for him to just cast it here, because I don't think you can finish off Dylan just with Xenagos tokens right here, especially given that Dylan's deck has a lot of 5-drops that can kind of take over the game.
Sure, so he's 1 Heroes down. As long as Heroes Downfall is there for the Domri, yeah, 2/2s really won't power through, say, an Obsidat or a Blood Baron. He does have a Mizium Mortars for the first time he sees Blood Baron, so he's got a little more time, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, the Blood Baron is not the issue. It's really the Obsidat's more of an issue. But it looks like Dylan does have an ultimate price in his hand. which won't be able to deal with the Gorkling Rampager.
All right, so a Satyr token attacks there and and then Elvish Mystic will be the follow-up play.
Yeah, and he chooses not to attack with the Mystic because Dylan does have a Mutavault in there. It's hidden under the lands, so he doesn't want to attack into the Mutavault. Plus, Sylvan Caryatid can be left back to block the Mutavault when he tries to attack Domri or Xenagos.
Yep, Dylan's going to go ahead and ultimate price the Elvish Mystic. To me, that's just a nod to the fact that he'll likely be tapping out on the next 3 turns for 5 drops.
Yeah, it seems a little aggressive there just because you still don't want to lose to Stormbred Dragon. Not sure if the Mystic's going to be really playing much of a role in this game at this point.
All right. Well, 5-drop number 1 is on the board. That's going to be the Abzadat Ghost Council. So he will lead off on that. Steal 2 life back from Kent.
And it looks like he's going to wave out that Abzadat.
Yep, and it'll go ahead and blink away. Now, there's not too much worry about keeping it in as a blocker. If he wanted to, I would imagine. There don't seem to be too many ways for Kent to kill it on his own turn.
Wow, this game looks so good for Kent, but he keeps missing with that Domri. Now, obviously, he's getting closer and closer to ultimating it, so it might not matter. But again, he really needs to start hitting because those 5 drops from Dylan, they could prove problematic. Obviously, he's got multiple Mizium
Yeah,
Mortars now
he has
because
Mizium Mortars, copies number 3 and 4 of Mizium Mortars in hand, which should be great against the 2 copies of Blood Baron that Dylan's holding.
Yeah, you don't want a top deck Elspeth here to just take over the game. Elspeth can trump a lot of Planeswalkers.
All right, so life totals are 13 for Dylan, 20 for Kent as Abzadat re-enters the battlefield. And the draw here we see from Kent, Dylan's actually a Thoughtseize. That will be pretty live for him here.
Yeah, it gets rid of one of the mortars. So, and I think he does have multiple copies of Blood Barons. So, at least he'll be able to hopefully keep one of them into play. The thing is, though, if Kent is able to just get one more turn with that Domri, it will get ultimate. So, I think he's probably in okay shape now. But again, if he hit at least once with that Domri raid, the whole game is the whole texture of the game is much different. But
yeah, so Dylan here now has a decision to whether or not he wants to tap out for Blood Baron or simply try to draw into something like Hero's Downfall with that Underworld Connections.
And I think you have to play I think he might have a second Connections in his hand, or either way though. I think Blood Baron really doesn't do much. I think you want to just draw a card, try to get that Hero's Downfall, because you're pretty much colded to an ultimated Domri, especially with the Xenagos in play.
Yeah, I know the Domri emblem with Xenagos in play is certainly threatening. Making a 2/2 double strike. Those are cards that actually will trade with your Blood Baron.
Yeah, 2/2 double strike, hexproof. So I think Dylan needs to kind of draw into Hero's Downfall, or even some way to kind of get damage through. I'm not sure he has any reach, really. Yeah. He's got Bile-Blight. Bile-Blight could be a potential way if Kent tries to block with one of the Xenagos tokens.
Yeah, the difficulty, I think, for Dylan is that the blockers right now are Sylvan Caryatids, so there's very few ways for him to remove the blockers. He's going to go ahead and draw with Underworld Connections. He finds a Temple, so a little bit of unfortunate sequencing for Dylan there. He started on the Swamp that turn, which meant when he drew the Temple, he was unable to play the Temple and Scry.
And Dylan actually played the land already for the turn, so he wasn't able to play it again. And here, Scry land for Ken, so he can set up his draw a little bit, and he's forced to drop to the bottom, so he still might miss with Domri here.
So many chances to hit with Domri, and the timer's made his way from 3 to 6 without drawing a card. Let's see, it's going up to 7. Will Kent finally get a free card off it? No, not at all.
So,
but he's still not in bad shape. He could be in a lot better shape.
He has 2 Planeswalkers in play. He's always going to be in decent shape. But again, if he hit at least once with that Domri, I would say the game he's got it confidently in hand. Right now, I'd say it's questionable, but it's pretty good for him. And here he has there's multiple copies of Mutavault. So I think Ken has to play a little conservatively here now. There's really no reason to go for it. He's basically just has to dodge Hero's Downfall for one turn. He's going to give Dylan 2 draws. I don't really think... Actually, with Dylan at 10, it might be right to just go all in. But let's see here.
Well, yeah, the question is, what draws is he actually worried about. By putting pressure on Dylan, he is taking away Dylan's ability to cast to activate Underworld connections a lot of times. He's going to go ahead and swing with 3 Satyrs. One will trade with a Mutavault, one will be blocked by the Ghost Council. Dylan will go down to 8 life.
Yeah, I think that attack's fine. I think you want to make sure you don't attack with your Rampager. So now he wipes away Dylan's board. Dylan's drops to 8. He just has a Mutavault and Underworld connections in play, and still Kent is threatening the ultimate next turn. So even if he digs for Hero's Downfall here, he's basically going to have to spend most of his resources to do that. And Kent still has a Mutavault, a Xenagos token, another Xenagos activation, and a Gorkline Rampager on his side to attack.
All right, well, Temple of Silence was played by Dylan Harris. He actually chose to keep his Scry card on top of his deck, which means presumably he's found something that is worth casting. Well, it looks like that something's just going to be the Blood Baron.
Yeah, I don't get this, because even with the life link, I think he's still dead to the double strike of Domri's ability. So let's see here. He's going to have to block. Yeah, even if he blocks a Rampager. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Dylan just dies here.
Yeah, those. So right now, going over Kent's board, it is a Domri, a Xenagos, a Satyr token. Under that is a Gorklan Rampager, and actually there's 2 Sylvan Caryatids. Those are not going to be able to attack, but with a Domri emblem, Dylan will be able to have 8 double striking power, 4 of it with Trample.
Yeah, and I don't think there was much Dylan could have done that turn. He didn't really have enough mana to Hero's Downfall to Domri and block and play another spell. He could maybe activate Mutavault for one of the blockers, but Kent would have too many attackers anyway. He'd have the Rampager, 2 Xenagos tokens, and the Mutavault. So 8 damage is coming through no matter what. So not really much of a choice for Dylan here. And yep, Kent's going to swing with everything.
Mutavault, and that will go ahead and do it. So game 1 goes to Kent Ketter. Once again, he's looking like he may 2-0 a black-white mid-range deck again, as we saw in the top 8.
Yeah, and it's those the power of Planeswalkers. You know, when you think of the powerful Planeswalkers, you really think of Jason Elspeth a lot. But, you know, green-red monsters, Domri and Xenagos, they really can put a hurting on a lot of decks.
All right, so before we go ahead and get into sideboarding, we're going to bring you back into the booth. I'm Matthias Hunt, joined by Osip Levodovich. And it's the top 4, so we do have a giveaway that we do. How do the rules work? Well, if you are following us live, then we will ask a question. You have to tweet the correct answer with the hashtag SCGPremium, just appearing right there on the bottom of your screen. Of those answers, at the end of the top 4, we will randomly select 1 correct answer to win 6 months of Star City Games Premium. So, question for the round. We've talked a little bit about black-white mid-range. Now, you mentioned the absence of a card in Dylan's deck, but this is a card that was in previous opponent Jesse Butler's deck. It's a white reprint from Scars of Mirrodin. It's a common. We're asking, so we'll say, what 2-mana white sorcery was reprinted from Scars of Mirrodin was featured in the sideboard of Jesse Butler in black-white midrange. Yes. This is one that came up last time. So if you believe you know the answer to it, remember the deck lists are at starcitygames.com. Tweet that card, and if you have the hashtag SCG Premium, you will possibly win 6 months of Star City Games Premium. So stay tuned, and at the end of the top 4, we'll do that giveaway.
And yeah, it's a tough one. Make sure you go to starcitygames.com to look up the deck list.
Absolutely. I'll go back to the match, though. So we are looking at the sideboard here now of Dylan Harris. Like it still to me feels like a mono black deck, but one of the things that the white and black white mid range gets is it gets better sideboarding options than you'd expect out of black decks. But here, when I look at Dylan's deck, his sideboard looks almost exactly like a mono black sideboard.
Yeah, unlike Jesse Butler's deck, Dylan's much more of just basically a mono black deck splashing white. His main deck, he does have those 2 copies of Elspeth Sun Champion, and he's got 2 copies of Obzerat, which is kind of a heavier white splash than we've seen before. But his sideboard really doesn't have that many white cards. The one white card that he does have, though, which could play an impact in this match, is Merciless Eviction. Merciless Eviction is a 6-mana wrath that effectively he can choose to eliminate planeswalkers or creatures if he wants, both of which are problematic for Dylan out of Kent's deck. So I definitely think Merciless Eviction is a card that's going to be coming in.
Yeah, I think what's really neat about Merciless Eviction is that it's this really selective wrath. It wraths one thing, and it doesn't even destroy it, it exiles them, so it can even take care of gods, which, as we know, Kent is playing in Xenagos, God of Revels.
Yeah, and it's one of those cards that I think Kent really has to be concerned with, because we saw how he won that game. It was on the power of Domri and Xenagos. And he really kind of needs to lean on his Planeswalkers in this matchup because Dylan has so many targeted removal spells along with Lifebane zombies to kind of strip out threats. So he really has to lean on those Planeswalkers because they're a lot harder for Dylan to deal with. And after board, it gets a lot harder for Kent because not only is Lifebane attacking your hand of your creatures, but it can also attack cards like Domri and Xenagos because it has Intimidate. So Lifebane Zombie is going to be very problematic for Kent, along with that one Merciless Eviction.
Yeah, so good sideboard options for Dylan. On Ken's side, we talked about this a bit in the top 8, how we felt his main deck was pretty well positioned here. We saw Rurik Thar. Last match he was able to resolve a Rurik Thar with his opponent on 6 life, and that was all it wrote for the game. But other than that, we weren't sure how much we liked any of the cards. Dylan's last opponent, Jesse Butler, had Alms Beasts, so he didn't really like Arbor Colossus. Because Dylan's playing Desecration Demons, is Arbor Colossus now a consideration?
Yeah, honestly, I think the main card that has to kind of concern Kent after board is, he can't really deal with Lifebane Zombie. He really can't deal with Merciless Eviction, but Desecration Demon is a card that he could deal with. So I think he has those Arbor Colossus and the Plummets in his sideboard specifically for Demon, so he's definitely going to bring in those cards. I think the real question for Kent, though, is what else do you bring in? I mean, you don't have that many cards in your main deck that you want to board out. Mizzium Mortars obviously isn't ideal against Dylan's deck, but you also can't just lose to Pack Rat. And I don't think he has to worry about Blood Baron after board. It's kind of unlikely that Dylan will probably keep in all 4 Blood Barons because they're not very good against green-based decks. But still, you don't want to lose to an unchecked Pack Rat. That is one way you can easily lose if you're mono green, if you're green red. So it's kind of a tough spot for Kent because game 1, I think he's in decent shape. After board, though, he's contending against 4 Doomblades, Lifebane Zombie, Merciless Eviction, and he doesn't really know what to do with those Mizzium Warriors.
Yes, certainly the double Blood Baron draw from Dylan was kept at bay by the fact that Kent had drawn all 4 of his main deck Mizzium Mortars in that game. Obviously, there were other compounding factors to it. Dylan did stick on 3 lands for a couple turns, but I think especially when you see he saw a full play set of Mizzium Mortars out of Ketter. They do have access to each other's deck lists, so that's not a surprise. Yeah, I agree that I can't imagine he's still on a 4 Blood Baron plan.
Well, the other thing would be is that the other thing that Ken has to consider is how good his Gore Clan Rampages are after board. I mean, it's really tough to play 4 Blood Rush cards when your opponent's packing 4 Deathblade, Doomblade along with 4 Heroes Downfall and Ultimate Price. Like, there's just so many removals, 1-for-1 removal spells that Dylan has in his deck now that I'm not sure Gore Clan Rampager is as good. Even though you kind of need it to power through Desecration Demon at times, you do have Plummets now, you do have Arbor Colossus, so he might consider shaving some of the Gore Clan Rampager's numbers
It's
as well.
really just a 4-4 for 4 in this matchup, I would imagine. When your opponent's killing all your spells, you don't really have the luxury to Blood Rush away one of your creatures.
Yeah, so it really comes down to Mizzium Mortars and Gore Clan Rampagers. How does he want to shave some of those numbers to kind of fit in the cards like Arbor Colossus and Plummets?
So in the top 8, we saw Kent Ketter dispatch Jesse Butler 2-0. We also saw Chris Yarbrough in his comeback victory over Michael Majors 2-1. Top 4 looks like it may be a repeat as Kent Ketter takes the first game off Dylan Harris. And update on our other match, Chris Yarbrough currently up 1-0 over his mono blue opponent Eric Gray.
Yeah, and Chris actually had a really interesting match against Majors in our semifinals, or in the quarterfinals rather. It was and it kind of showed you. I actually thought he was going to win the match just because he kind of puts a lot of pressure on the mono blue player with cards like Brimaz, along with the Supreme Verdict, which is also always difficult. But he also has a lot more targeted removal effects than a typical blue-white deck. He has Izzet Charm, Mizzium Mortars, so a lot of ways to kind of interact with Kent's board. I mean, the mono blue player's board.
Yeah, absolutely. So, moving on to sideboard. So, let's talk about this match post-sideboard. I think the green-red monster stack certainly presents a diverse array of threats. It has planeswalkers, it has gods, has haste creatures, protection creatures on top of that. Would you say post-board, is this match still in Kent's favor, or was it ever in Kent's favor to begin with?
I think game 1 it's probably a little in Kent's favor just because he has a diverse number of threats. He's got basically 7 planeswalkers in his deck, 3 different types of planeswalkers, 1 Chandra, 1 Xenagos, and Domri. So he has different types of planeswalkers. He's got Stormbreath Dragon for that, which is a really efficient, hasty threat. So he's got a lot of really problematic cards for Dylan game one. After board, though, Kent's got to contend with 4 copies of Doomblade, so there's a lot more targeted removal spells, and he's got to deal with Lifebane Zombie, which not only strips your hand, but again, attacks that Planeswalker. We saw in the first game, Dylan really didn't have a way to kind of attack the Planeswalker, so you're kind of all in on drawing Hero's Downfall. So it gets a lot better for Dylan after board.
All right, well, we are underway. Dylan starts the game on a Swamp Kent with his turn 1 mana accelerant. It's Elvish Mystic. Looks like it's going to be unlikely to stick around, though, as its flesh will be devoured on turn 2, and Kent goes to 19.
Yeah, and good thing for him, too, because it looks like Kent does have a Domri in his hand, so Dylan is just going to have to try to keep enough... oh, no, it looks like Stormbreath Dragon, Gorkland Rampager, and Xenagos. Xenagos is the Planeswalker, so... it looks like Dylan might have a Thoughtseize, which is another really problematic card for green decks.
Yeah, Dylan just content right now to develop his mana base and 1-for-1, and it looks like we're going to see that Thoughtseize fired off now on turn 3. So we'll get that look at Kent's hand. It is a 3rd land, a 4th land, and as you said, a Xenagos, Stormbreath, and Gorkland Rampager.
So really good start for Dylan. He's able to slow down Kent's ramp and take one of the Planeswalkers, which is always a problematic card for the black-white deck. So Dylan has a really good start here. Kent just has a couple of monsters and lands in his hand.
Right, and Dylan see the draw for the turn, which was Sylvan Caryatid. So Kent develops his mana base with land and Caryatid. That's threatening a turn 4 Stormbreath on his side.
Yeah, and Dylan, it looks like he does have an ultimate price for the Stormbreath, but he used that Devour Flesh, so he won't be able to deal with the Caryatid, I believe. So Kent does have some ramp here. Let's see what Dylan does in his turn. Desecration Demon would be huge here.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not positive Dylan needs to deal with the Caryatid anymore.
Oh,
certainly you're right though. It does turn off cards like Devour Flesh.
Yeah, I think he would love to be able to. Yeah, oh, it looks he does have the other Devour Flesh, so he is able to use it. So he's keeping Kent off of 5 mana next turn. Kent can probably Kent can still cast a Gorkhan Rampager, which is likely what he's going to do. It's not really worth it to Blood Rush after board.
Yeah, and Dylan's strategy here, I like how focused it is. It's all kill spells and 1 Elspeth.
Yeah.
You know.
That's good enough for most decks.
Yeah, certainly that's good against green-red.
And it looks like he's got double Doomblade. Yeah, his hand is doubled, at least 1 Doomblade and Elspeth. So
right. So kill everything, then clean up with Elspeth.
And this is one of the things that I was asking Kent about. I'm like, well, how do you really deal with Elspeth? And he's like, well, it's kind of hard, but that can be said about any deck, really. It's, Elspeth's going to be one of those cards that it's hard for you to beat no matter what.
So the first Gorkland Rampager is hit by a Doomblade. Dylan does not have the 6th land for Elspeth. However, his draw is nearly as good. He now sits on Doomblade, Hero's Downfall, and that Elspeth. We'll see what fate befalls that Gorkland Rampager cast by Kent. He's going to go ahead and draw land number 5. That will be Stormbreath Dragon, and it looks like both will be taken out. First Stormbreath by a Doomblade, then the Gorkland will downfall. And now both players left with 1 card in hand.
Oh, wow. And Dylan doesn't draw a land to cast Elspeth, but he does draw a Desecration Demon.
Nearly as good.
Nearly as good.
So now that we are 5 kill spells deep on Dylan's side, finally he plays a threat of his own.
So Elvish Mystic comes down. Kent does keep the card on top of his library, so he doesn't scry to the bottom. Dylan doesn't look like he has double white, though. He has 1 Temple of Silence, so he's going to need to draw a Godless Shrine.
And so he draws another Doomblade.
Good enough.
Sure. I love the singular mind that this black-white mid-range deck has post-board. It's just Doomblades.
Oh, wow, Plummet. So good draw there from Kent. He's actually going to be able to at least deal with the Desecration Demon.
Yeah. He took 8 on that previous swing from Desecration Demon and Mutavault, but you're right, his draw was Plummet. He'll be able to take care of the Demon. And a Hero's Downfall for Dylan. Well, there's a game plan. Let me tell you about it.
And that's sort of the frustrating thing when you're playing green is they just have so many removal spells, So
many Doomblades.
They don't even need Underworld Connections. They just have such a high volume of removal spells that it feels like such an uphill battle.
I remember back when Baneslayer Angel was first printed, that's when the phrase was thrown around of when you describe a creature and say, oh, well, yeah, that creature's good, but it just dies to Doomblade. And I feel like we're seeing a lot of just dies to Doomblade
Yeah.
right now.
Well, good news for Kent. Kent was able to draw a Doomblade out with an Elvish Mystic, but unfortunately Dylan drew another Doomblade.
That's Doomblade number 4. I believe he's cast. That is his 4th Doomblade on Pelucranos. Wow, 1, 2, 3, 4.
That is all 4.
It's
yeah.
4 Doomblades, 2 Devour Fleshes, and 2 Heroes Downfalls that have been cast so far.
This is the exact reason I stopped playing Green Red.
This is miserable. Why
It's literally
would I
the
do
worst
this?
feeling in the world. You just
All
feel
your
like an
cards
idiot.
die. He just goes ahead and starts binning it.
All right, so good news for Kent. Dylan finally stopped drawing removal spells.
No,
He
he's
drew
got
a
one more. He's
land.
got one more.
Yeah, so he's got a Hero's Downfall, but he didn't draw another removal spell, and the land he drew was a swamp, so he
So-
still doesn't have access to double white for that Elspeth.
So Cat down to 10 off 5 Mutavault hits. All right, can he find another creature? Temple of Abandon puts a card to the bottom. Mutavault is chipping away,
Oh,
and
wow.
this is bad. Oh, no, it's a Mutavault.
It's a
Okay.
Mutavault, so he doesn't have. Yep, he doesn't have access to double white.
Not yet. So Mutavault will activate. You could activate
Kind
it.
of
put
tipped his
Kent-
hand a little bit. I think it's
Yeah.
obvious what he has here.
I think Kent's asking which Mutavault's that. Is that the one you just played? Down they'll say, well, okay, sure, whatever, I'll activate. We're activating. It is okay to say you're activating. He's activating the not summoning sick one. He has enough spare mana that he really could just activate both. All right, so the extra mana had to be paid. I guess he activated the wrong physical card.
Oh, Mizzy and Mortars for a draw there for Kent. That's one of the reasons why you really don't want that card, but again, it's hard to
Well,
board
when
him
your
out.
opponent has played 9 pinpoint removal spells, eventually you end up drawing something that's not a monster.
All right, he drew a Stormbright Dragon, so
So right now, Kent's
it's going to be a
graveyard.
blocker. Oh, he's at 2. He actually can't do anything here.
If you're following at home, Kent's graveyard currently contains 2 Gorklan Rampagers, 2 Pelucranos, a Stormbreath Dragon, an Elvish Mystic, a Sylvan Caryatid, and there's one more that I'm missing here. But it's got a lot. It's a monster graveyard right now, and that game will go toward Dylan.
Yeah, and you might say, oh, wow, Dylan got lucky. He drew 4 Doomblades. But the truth is, Dylan's deck is just basically all removal spells and big creatures to kind of lock
It
up
was
the
a
game
Thought
after that.
Seize, 2 Devour Fleshes, 3 Downfalls, and 4 Doomblades. So
Yeah.
what the old 1, 2, 3, 4. So as these players head to Game 3, our update is our other match between Chris Yarborough and Eric Gray is also headed to Game 3. So it's a couple comebacks in order right now.
Yeah, so both matches to Game 3 here. Both Kent and Chris were able to defeat their opponents 2-0, I believe, in the first round. But now things getting a little harder for them. And I'm not really that surprised in this matchup because I thought that Dylan's version of Black-White was a lot better prepared for kind of these green-red decks because really it's not just the Lifebane Zombie and the Merciless Eviction, it's that Doomblade, that number 4 next to it. A lot of the mono black decks these days have been skimping on the number of Doomblades in their deck. That's why at Grand Prix Kentucky, Grand Prix Louisville, mono black had a really, really good matchup against green base decks because they were running Doomblades main.
Yeah.
As the format kind of evolved and more mono black decks started cropping up, people just couldn't afford to do that anymore. And you got to the point where people weren't even playing Doomblade anywhere in their 75 cards. So obviously that matchup kind of moved a little away from being favorable to being maybe even or slightly in favor of the green-red deck. Now Dylan's deck is like, nope, I'm pretty sure green decks are going to be good again because of Born of God, so I'm packing 4 Doomblades in my sideboard. So he's definitely better prepared than some of the mono black decks I think we've seen today.
Well, yeah, as you see, he boarded in a full 4 Doomblades. I actually like how singular-minded his sideboard is. 4 green decks, he has 3 Lifebanes, 4 Doomblades. For control, 4 Duresses. He has basically his sights on 2 decks, but he has a lot of cards for them.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, though, is he doesn't have that much against mono black. Erebos is obviously a card to bring in. He only has 2 copies of Dark Betrayal. So he's basically shaving some of the numbers that a lot of mono black decks have, between 5 and 6 cards for the mirror, where he really only has 3 cards.
Well, a lot of times we've seen cards like Farika's Cure in the sideboard, which would be okay in a mono black matchup. Things that kill Pack Rat, for example. The fact he's up to 4 Doomblades does mean he has less game there. Maybe that's because he now has cards like Bile-Blight in the main deck, and he's less worried about getting Pack Ratted in the mirror.
Yeah, I think Bile-Blight is certainly one of the reasons. And plus, the fact that he has 4 copies of Blood Baron, Viscopa, and 2 copies of Elspeth, I think maybe he thinks that his matchup against Mono Black is actually not that bad, so he doesn't need to devote as many cards to the sideboard. Plus, he's got the Whip of Erebos and Opposite Eye Ghost Cancel combo in his deck, which is very difficult for Mono Black to beat.
Yeah, the other thing he has, which is of note, is that he has 0 Drown in Sorrow in his sideboard.
Yeah.
And that's something that's certainly, I would say, was put into the sideboards of most of the Mono Black decks we saw this weekend.
And I think I'm actually okay with that because I haven't actually seen Drown in Sorrow be really impressive this weekend, whereas Doomblade is always awesome, even in the matchups where you usually want.
All 4 Doomblades were great last game.
I've seen some lists where they go 2 Doomblades, 2 Drown in Sorrow. I kind of like just going 4 Doomblades.
All right, well, we are underway for Game 3. We're going to see whether or not Kent can really stick a monster with his Green-Red Monster stack. Turn 1 is going to be Elvish Mystic. We'll see if he has that draw where he hits a turn 2 Walker. It does not seem like it.
So he doesn't have turn 2 Domri, and he has that Courser in his hand, but he's able to develop his mana at least, which is exactly what he needs to do. Kind of start, if he can get to the point where he can just start top decking fatties. Even though Dylan has a lot of removal spells, it might just be good enough.
Yeah, and that's to put some pressure. We see Dylan with the draw there. He has land 2. He's going to pick between Pack Rat and Devour Flesh for the turn. And it's the kill spell route he chooses. Devour Flesh cast by Dylan Harris. And it's going to be Elvish Mystic dying, Sylvan Caryatid living.
And I think Kent's got to be happy with that. He's okay with getting rid of one of his elves.
And he has, it looks like, a full 3 Courser of Krufix here. We're going to see the first one flips over Gorklan Rampager. And, you know, if we ever wanted to have a game where we saw whether or not Courser of Krufix is good in a grinding matchup, this is the one for me.
Yeah.
You know, he has a full 3 of them. Let's see how many cards he can get off them.
Not only that, but he's got Xenagos God of Revels. If he can get that into play, but I don't know, does Dylan have a Lifebane Zombie? That would be brutal.
Yeah.
Let's see what Dylan tries to do here. It looks like he's gonna cast Ultimate Price. So great, Ken dodges that, and now if he can get a land. Oh, but he doesn't have one. He has a Gorkland Rampager on top, so he's not going to be able to
so he draws
play
Gorkland Rampager, but he's not even on that plan. He's just going to grind. It's not replaces his Courser of Krufix, and he nets his first free land. That's a forest off the top of the deck. Kent gains a life off that.
He's got to flip his card again, though. He keeps forgetting. Considering how much he likes Courser, he forgets to flip the top card of his library a lot. So not the worst shape for Kent. He's got the mana he needs. He's got Xenagos God of Revels. If he can get that into play, that'd be huge for him. It suddenly makes all his cards, all his creatures really, really impactful threats.
Well, what's interesting here is that Dylan is on the kill all the creatures plan, but Kent, because his creature is Courser of Krufix, he doesn't particularly mind right now. You know, he's just trying to net free cards, as we see right there, draw of Mountain. He's going to get a free Mutavault off the top. So it's 2 free lands thanks to Courser, and now he will cast the namesake card, Xenagos, God of Revels.
And he forgets to reveal the top card of his library yet again.
Well, this is the first time we've actually seen the card in play.
And he's actually pretty close to getting Devotion for red-green, too. Xenagos, God of Revels, he activates the ability at the beginning of his combat step, so Courser gets a +2/+2 attacks for 4, and he just gets chump blocked by.
Chumped by Pack Rat. That's huge. That's quite a chump block there by Dylan. And Dylan is stuck on 3 lands.
Yeah. He's got white mana either.
No white mana. He's got to control the board here. It seems like a good bet that Kent will be able to activate Xenagos next turn.
Yeah, so he looks like he's going to cast yet another Pack Rat here.
And that's not going to do it at all. A draw of Gorklan Rampager for Kent. Dylan already knows Kent has another Gorklan in his hand, as Kent nets a 3 card, so he knows that Xenagos is going to be active.
There's a Xenagos the Reveler on top of his library. So, yeah, he's definitely going to be able to he could attack with Xenagos this turn, because I believe he'll have enough Devotion. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If he plays Rampager,
that'll be 6
that'll
and
be
7.
7. And then he could target Xenagos, the God of Revels, with it by itself, I believe.
Yeah, so it's another target creature, but what it can do is give this freshly cast Gorklan Rampager haste. That's something it looks like he will do, so it'll be an 8/8 trample haste. And he goes one step farther. He's going to go ahead and cast that other Courser out of his hand, and a huge amount of power on Kent's side of the board. It's a 1 Courser, another Courser, a 6/5 Xenagos, a 4/4 Gore Clan, and the Gore Clan actually has turned into an 8/8 trample haste, so we have a swing of 16 power on Kent's side of the board. 8 of it tramples.
So best block there is blocking Xenagos, and he's going to have to take 10 there.
Yeah, so Dylan goes from 20. We're immediately down to 10, facing what looks to be a lethal attack next turn. And Course of Krufix, pretty impressive this game.
Yeah, it definitely prevented Kent from getting land flooded, which is something that is really problematic for the red-green deck at times.
It was a card that Dylan had to spend removal spells on, but a card that Kent didn't really mind when it got removed. He still got to continue at full speed into his late game.
Yep.
I think that really has been the difference here. I'm assuming we have a lethal attack here. It seems unlikely that Dylan will be able to survive this charge.
Yeah, he can play Xenagos the Reveler, get a haste creature, attack with Mutavault, and he still has mana to actually activate Gorklan Rampager from his hand. So pretty sure he has more than lethal.
The old combo of Xenagos and Xenagos in play.
And since one is, they're actually different, so it's not like Planeswalkers.
It's always confusing to explain something. Like, no. These Xenagoses can coexist.
Yeah.
This is him when he was back when he was a Planeswalker. This is him once he became a god.
Yeah, they're different.
So 2-1, Ken Ketter dispatches Dylan Harris in our semifinals, and we'll move on to the finals, where he awaits the winner of Eric Gray and Chris Yarbrough.
So pretty interesting match there. We got to see the power level of 2 Born of the God cards, Courser of Krufix and Xenagos God of Revels. Both really had a huge impact on that game. Obviously, Dylan was stalled on land there, so there wasn't that much he can do. But either way, once Kent gets those cards into play, it's difficult for Dylan, especially Xenagos. It's difficult for Dylan to really answer that card.